Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, to the Prime Minister, does he stand by his statement that, quote, for most New Zealanders an indication of how well the economy is doing is whether or not they can keep up with the cost of living? And if so, is he satisfied that they currently can?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and we have official statistics that regularly measure those things. Last year, average weekly wages went up 3.2%, while the cost of living measured by the CPI went up only 1.5%. The year before that was 2.5% for wages and only 0.9% for inflation. And the year before that was 3.4% for wages and only 1.6% for inflation. So it's very clear that on average wages have been rising considerably faster than inflation. No wonder most New Zealanders think the economy is doing well.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, in light of that answer, is it therefore acceptable to him that most figures show CEO pay was 26.4 times that of an average employee last year, and that 46% of workers didn't receive a pay rate increase in the last year at all?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, in relation to the last point, the member is quite wrong. That's the LCI. The much better measure is the QES.
Picking and choosing
Order. Calling the member to ask a supplementary question.
Since the Prime Minister likes to pick and choose his measures, in light of the Robert Walters survey showing that 49% of all New Zealand employers are intending to offer no pay increase to staff this year, what plans does he have to ensure workers get a fair share of the economy? And is he going to speak to Stephen Joyce about his limit of 1% for MBIE staff?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister, those questions.
Last year, average weekly wages went up 3.2% against costs of 1.5%. But I must point out, Mr Speaker, if the member wants to look at the LCI as the measure, and I'd strongly suggest he doesn't because it actually excludes so many things, the number of 45% of people is exactly the same as it was over Labour's average last term.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Would the Prime Minister like to explain to the House and to New Zealanders the difference between average incomes and median incomes? And can he confirm that for median income earners, that's the one in the middle, the median income has gone down $19 a week since he took office?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, seeing the member was so kind to answer his own question, I probably won't need to bother.
I'm very pleased, sir, that he has confirmed.
Order.
Very pleased, sir, that he has confirmed that wages have gone backwards under his government. Wages have gone backwards under National, Mr Speaker. So therefore, Mr Speaker, is it acceptable to him that 2.5 years after the recession has ended, there are still 42,000 more people unemployed than in December 2008? And will he now support Labour's target to reduce unemployment to 4%?
Mr Speaker, well, for start off, the country has generated 84,000 jobs approximately over the last year. 1,500 people a week are going off welfare to work. Mr Speaker, a target doesn't make a policy. I remember when the Leader of the Opposition said his target was to get Labor to 40%, not 23%.
Mr
Order.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, since the Prime Minister is so fond of polls, would he like to comment on the one that says 81% of New Zealanders don't like coattailing and why he's still considering doing a shady deal with Colin Craig?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, notwithstanding I don't have ministerial responsibility there, I am happy to say this. If the member wants to rule out dealing with the internet mana party, which would be coming in under the coattailing, and say that to the House and to New Zealand today, I'll take him seriously. But guess what? When you're 23%, you don't rule anybody out.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Supplementary. If Labor is prepared to rule out a pre-election coalition deal with the Internet Mana Party, will the National Party rule out one with the Conservatives Act and United Future?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, what the National Government is going to do, notwithstanding I don't have ministerial responsibility for it, is make sure that we are honest, open and transparent with the New Zealand public. Something that David Cunliffe struggles quite a lot with these days.
Order. 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 Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare. Does the Prime Minister agree with the research from Otago University that shows that 40% of New Zealand's children in the most deprived communities don't have a raincoat, among other essentials?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no, I can't support that research, but what I can say is the National-led government, through Kiwi Can, has given considerable resources to make sure that there are things like raincoats and shoes for the most vulnerable children.
Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Does the Prime Minister agree with the research from Otago University that shows that 65% of children in the most deprived communities in New Zealand go without fruit and vegetables often because their families cannot afford to eat well?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, again, I can't back up the research, but what I can say is the National-led government has continued the Fruit in Schools program. It's also introduced, with the support of Fonterra and Sanitarium, breakfast in schools. And in the worst of the economic times, the government borrowed billions and billions of dollars to support the most vulnerable New Zealanders.
Order. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with Jonathan Boston that the fact that huge proportions of New Zealand's children living in the most deprived communities in this country go without the basics of life, such as raincoats, fresh food and even play dates, showing that, quote, public help for many families is simply inadequate?
Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, I can't support the research from Jonathan Boston, but what I can say is the government borrowed in excess of $5 billion a year to support the most vulnerable New Zealanders. And I think one of the reasons why the government actually does have widespread support is that New Zealanders recognise that the government, through the worst of economic times, has been fair. The second thing the government's been doing is working hard with New Zealanders to create jobs, and the fastest way to move those children out of vulnerable circumstances is to make sure their parents can work. The truth is, under a Greens administration, those families would be on the dole queue.
Question number 3, Honourable Tauhanare.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance. No, this is not about polls.
Order. If the member would just ask his question.